What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another episode, and everyone knows what we have to talk about today. Listen, Tuesdays are tough for me to get out here and do a video, so I wanted to come Wednesday morning after I had some time to kind of do my research, think about what this fit means for Jackson State, and kind of bring you guys a all-encompassing episode. But Jackson State announced to hire a former NFL head coach, Mike Zimmer, as a defensive analyst yesterday, and the internet went just wild with this, man. A lot of people had a lot of different takes. He spoke with I believe it was the pregame show after this hour. We'll kind of get into what he said, but let's get into who Mike Zimmer is. And I would imagine that most people watching the video know about most of his NFL history, but he's been a defensive assistant for Missouri. He coached at Weber State for a while and was an intricate part to that defense, leading Weber State to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs that year. I believe it was 1987. They lose to Marshall in the quarterfinals, moves on, gets the promotion to Washington State's defensive coordinator, works for the Dallas Cowboys for a while, and wins the Super Bowl. Ultimately, that's where a big relationship with Coach Prime came into. Defensive coordinator for the Falcons for a year, was the D coordinator for the Bengals for multiple years, and then of course the head coach stint for the Vikings. Super Bowl champion, NFL Assistant Coach of the Year in 2009, won the George House Award in 2010, and has a 72 and 56 record in the regular season as a head coach. Was 2-3 in the postseason. But when he was a defensive coordinator for Washington State, I know a lot of people have this perception now that Washington State and the Pac-12 don't play a lot of defense, but Washington State in 1993 under Zimmer ranked eighth in the entire country in total defense, second in rushing defense while he was there. And he honestly created a defensive rebuild for that team. And when he was spoke with the pregame show, one of the quotes that stuck out to me was, he said, quote, "He asked me about it a few times. The pay's not good, but I do love Dion and I'll do anything for him." And I think this is something that I know a lot of people talked about Coach Prime's relationships in terms of business and getting celebrities to come to campus and getting former NFL players to be invested in the program. But something that I don't think a lot of people initially realized is his connections could pay off in terms of coaching, because we all know, we've talked about it endlessly with FBS talk, with different things, that Jackson State's budget has been a big point of emphasis, and getting connections where you can bring people in like a Mike Zimmer that will take a pay cut, and that way you can fit them in under the budget. Because I would guarantee Mike Zimmer is not taking an analyst job anywhere else in the country for what he's probably getting paid at Jackson State, which I don't know the exact dollar amount on that, but Coach Prom's connection with him and their relationship. When we know the funny, I guess, video where he answers a phone call, in the middle of a press conference. But I think when you watch that interview and look at how those guys interact, Mike Zimmer is not doing this for anybody else, and it's solely based on the fact of Coach Prom's relationship with Zimmer previously. And when you look at what he said about just watching the HBCU movement, he was talking about Eddie George, he talked about Hugh Jackson, and I thought what was interesting is how he talked about opening doors for young men, teaching them about life, and I think that kind of goes back into, he really thinks Coach Prime is doing something special at Jackson State. And he also mentioned, and this is something that I know a lot of people have talked about, he also talked about, white students and white individuals being more invested in understanding the history of what's going on at HBCUs. And I think he's another great example of that, where he admitted, he was like, I had no knowledge of really what was going on at any HBCUs. I really wasn't invested in what was going on. And all in Eddie George and Hugh Jackson and Deion Sanders being coming and coaching at HBCUs really opened doors for him and opened his eyes. And I think you've seen that with some other coaches. I mean, Brett Bartoloni is on the staff, and a few other guys. So that's another whole other layer to this conversation. But I wanted to speak on the analysts. So I think there's some people who were kind of wondering what analysts exactly do for a college football team. I know a few. I know Auburn right now has about eight, I believe, full-time analysts on the staff. Bama has, I believe, about 8 to 10. and same for like in schools like that. But in terms of the FCS, you would only have a handful on most staffs. But Jackson State, according to the website, is up to 4 full-time analysts. And Kendall Adams, Brandon Morton, Gunnar White, and Mike Zimmer now, all of which have some sort of playing history in college football. I believe one of them was from Kansas State, but Mike Zimmer's the only one with former NFL experience. But listen, this is big, man. I think the fact that that somehow Coach Prime is working this where he can have this very, very successful, experienced staff with the budget that Jackson State has, I think is something that a lot of people are, if you look back when he was hired, would be surprised that he was able to pull this off. The fact that you have Mike Zimmer, you get a guy Jeff Weeks, you get a guy Michael Pollock, Dennis Thurman, Tim Brewster coming in. I mean, all these coaches have long, successful careers elsewhere and are going to bring a whole nother level to Jackson State. And another thing with the analysts, I want to make sure this is clear. Analysts under NCAA rules are not allowed to work one on one with players. So Mike Zimmer is not going to be involved in player development or anything like that. What an analyst really does is take the film study of the other team, film study after the game, and break it down and really help the coaching staff develop a game plan, develop what they need to do better, kind of point things out. And that is where Mike Zimmer's expertise is going to come in. I mean, I don't even think you could put it into words how important that is to have a guy who has been coaching since the late 70s, has done it at the FBS level, the FCS level, the NFL, the highest level at the NFL, winning a Super Bowl, having his mind, knowing what to look for, knowing what Coach Prime and his staff want out of this program is the biggest thing in terms of what he's going to bring to the program. I know a lot of people were talking about player development. That's not going to be Mike Zimmer's job per se. He's not going to have not a lot of interaction with the players one on one, coaching them up or anything like that. But developing schemes, watching film, breaking down film, pointing out I would say areas of weakness and points of emphasis for the coaching staff is really going to be where Mike Zimmer is going to really excel on this staff. And I had someone tell me in the Jack State program a few weeks ago that this announcement was coming. I said, let's just wait and see if it happens. And here he is, Mike Zimmer as a defensive analyst for Jackson State. There's not a school, especially in the FCS, possibly in the country, that has a coach with a Super Bowl ring on staff as a analyst. That's usually reserved for guys who are looking to build up their coaching careers and find opportunities elsewhere. So, an amazing hire by Jackson State. I'm really excited to see what this turns into for an analyst position. Man, I think people are kind of not overhyped, but like they're putting too much stock into, okay, well, he did this as a coach, he did this. Listen, he's not interacting with the players, he's not a defensive coordinator. His football mind cannot be denied, especially in terms of experience. Having him in there with the other analyst, teaching them what to look for, setting the standard of what Jackson State wants to do in terms of film breakdown, scheme, points of emphasis, areas of improvement, is something that I don't think you can really put a price tag on. And the fact that his relationship with Coach Prime allowed him to come in and put together this amazing staff, man, and come here and take a huge pay cut and everything. It just speaks to the volumes of what relationships will really do for you in the coaching world, man. But listen, Mike Zimmer, former NFL head coach, accepts a defensive analyst job for Jackson State, man. Comment below your thoughts on this hire, what you think Zimmer could bring for this to this program and for this team this year, man. And we're only, I believe, 10 days away from the season, guys. Man, it is so close to week 0 kickoff in just one more weekend. But guys, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and stay tuned right here for more content from the Blue Bloods, man. But until then, we are out for right now.